r/AskReddit, what's the movie so bad that it killed off the whole franchise? When the Cat in the Hat movie with Mike Myers was released, Dr. Seuss's Theodore Geisel's wife Audrey was so disappointed and disgusted with how it turned out, she never approved of any more live-action adaptations. Subsequent films have now instead only used computer animation adaptations instead of live-action studio versions. Percy Jackson, Sea of Monsters. There were 3 more books in the PJ story plus all of Rick Riordan's other books/spin-offs. There was so much potential and it was just botched. Disney's The Lone Ranger and John Carter were both supposed to be the first of a series, like Pirates of the Caribbean. The Inkheart book series was fantastic. I was very dissatisfied in the movie, the only shining light being Brendan Fraser as the main guy. Green Lantern. They had big plans for sequels and a wide story arc, but because the movie bombed at the box office, all of that was scrapped. Allegiant, the movie after Divergent and Insurgent. The end of the Divergent series was never made into a movie because Allegiant turned out so badly. Any of these movies could have easily kick-started a whole successful franchise if they hadn't fucked up the opening entry so badly. Aragon, Avatar: The Last Airbender, Artemis Fowl. Fantastic Four. Edit for clarification, 2005 version wasn't bad, but the 2015 remake, Fantastic, was awful. I heard there were plans for a Stephen King cinematic universe of some sort, but given how badly The Dark Tower did, that's probably never going to happen now. The Last Airbender, I'm guessing by the ending they had elaborate plans to turn this into a franchise of all the seasons. Wow, so horribly bad. Also, prior to the movie I had never even watched an episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender. I had an even greater appreciation of how bad they fucked up after watching them all during the pandemic. Ouch. John Carter lost a shitload of money and was supposed to be a giant trilogy, but the first one flopped out of the gate, to the tune of losing somewhere around $200 million at the end of the day, making it one of the biggest bombs of all time. Nearly or mostly killed Taylor Kitsch's career too, though I have to point out he was supremely excellent as David Koresh in the miniseries Waco, which everyone should watch if they never have. Allegiant, it not only killed its franchise by cancelling its part 2, it made Hollywood not even want to make fiction novels into movies anymore, since the whole series boiled the genre down to such basic elements there was hardly any flavor to it. The Mummy with Tom Cruise. It was meant to kick off an entire dark universe of horror movie remakes, but it was horrible. Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, the most expensive indie film and most expensive European film of all time, $200+ million budget, and it barely broke even at the box office, probably netting a 9-figure loss when factoring in marketing and publicity costs. Neither Cara Delevingne nor Dane DeHaan have worked much since, though this was hardly the first franchise killer either of them have been involved with. Suicide Squad for Delevingne, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 for DeHaan. Percy Jackson. I know it came out with 2 movies, but the first one was so detested by fans that the fandom collectively decided to pretend they don't exist. As a result, the second one failed miserably and it was never picked up again despite being huge movie material. Queen of the Damned, Interview with the Vampire was amazing. 8 years later they skipped the second book in the series and went to the third. I don't know why. The second book, The Vampire's Dad, was the best in the series. Maybe they couldn't get Tom Cruise to continue, and just decided that would be the end of it. Then some jackass came up with the idea to do a shit job of Queen of the Damned and, ugh. Pacific Rim Uprising. Latest version of The Mummy with Tom Cruise, was supposed to herald a bunch of monster feature reboots including Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with Russell Crowe. The Golden Compass. Amazing Spider-Man 2. They had gigantic plans to spin off a gigantic Spider-Verse out of that film, but it was such a muddled mess, it brought that to a halt. But hey, Spider-Man's back in the MCU, and Sony is trying to piggyback a Spider-Verse off of that, so it all worked out in the end. Batman and Robin. There were multiple sequels planned and instead the continuity was ended and rebooted 7 years later with the Dark Knight trilogy completely changing the tone of the franchise to the exact opposite of Batman and Robin. Didn't Men in Black International kill off the 22 Jump Street sequel? I am number 4. The movie is just awful as it leaves out so much cool shit from the books. The movie is just a shameless cash grab and your typical high school romance with guy gets special powers and falls in love with quiet girl. I thought Timothy Olyphant did a good job, but he is just a good actor. Warcraft the movie. It pains me so much to say this one because I am a WoW player and I actually like the movie. I thought it was meh when I saw it in the theater, but now I have watched it at home half a dozen times. I like it more. I really wanted this movie to be the start of a whole string of Warcraft movies, but I don't think it will happen. Mortal Instruments, City of Bones. They changed so much of the story from the books that there is no way they could have come back from it. Fantastic Four, 2015 version. The cast seemed pretty stellar too. Miles Teller, Michael B. Jordan, Kate Mara. Boy was it bad though. Killed off any chances of a sequel. The Dark Tower. Back in the early 2000s I recall a whole string of attempted youth and YA novel adaptations that sucked so hard there were never sequels. Aragon, Imo. The source material was already pretty meh, but the studio went full awful on it, bungling the story, maybe to avoid an angry letter from George Lucas, and trying to rely on cheesy effects. A series of unfortunate events. They tried shoving 3 books into a single movie, plus a dumb murder plot that wasn't in the books, rushing through it all with barely a plot while hoping one famous actor would carry the entire film. Thank goodness for the Netflix show, Cirque du Freak, a modern vampire. Yeah, that was okay, and there was a cheesy B-movie of the first book, and the second book mashed together, weirdly cast and directed. It didn't really seem like anyone making the film expected there to be a sequel, others, I'm sure. King Arthur Legend of the Sword. I'm sure this was meant to be the first in like 7 movies. It's a shame. They had a great cast, but just bombed at the box office. I think Crimes of Grindelwald will prove to be the downfall of the Fantastic Beasts franchise. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Fantastic movie, and it had the setup for more sequels. It just didn't get the viewership it needed. Also, everything happening with Armie Hammer right now, I think it's safe to say the plans for a sequel have finished for good. The Tom Cruise Mummy remake was supposed to be the first in Universal's Dark Universe, where they make modern versions of the classic Universal monster movies, Dr. Hyde, Dracula, Wolf, Man, etc. It was so bad, it killed all the planned follow-ups, derailing something like 15 other movies, and wiped out a parallel project with Guillermo del Toro directing a Frankenstein series. I am surprised that nobody has mentioned Dune. The 1980s movie was really pushed hard before release. It was going to be bigger than Star Wars and then it flopped. After that, nothing. Dragon Ball Evolution. Grease 2. Disclaimer, it is my favorite Grease, and among my favorite Lifetime movies. Hot on the heels of the success of Grease, more Grease films were ordered. The production was a total shit show. The film was literally still being written as it was filming. Cast issues, it flopped, etc. As a result, a potential plan for Grease 3-5 were scrapped. Bonus, years later, those scripts were reworked and became another successful franchise, High School Musical. The movie Titan A.E. literally forced Fox Animation Studios to shut down permanently. Edit. I looked up when Fox Animation Studios shut down and when Titan A.E. was released. Fox shut down 10 days after the movie was released. Jaws, The Revenge, killed the entire Jaws series abruptly and got 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. X-Men, Dark Phoenix should have stopped at Logan. I think a lot of people don't get what killed off the whole franchise means. I found a comment saying Endgame, it's the second highest grossing movie ever brought. Star Trek Nemesis killed off Star Trek movies for 7 years and even then we got a reboot instead of a continuation of the old franchise. The Enterprise show, which is better than most people give it credit for, kept the franchise limping along for a couple of years after Nemesis, but the Prime Universe as a franchise was effectively dead up until they brought it back with Star Trek Discovery a couple of years ago. Artemis Fowl. The Mummy with Tom Cruise. It was supposed to start a whole universe, Dark Universe, with the Mummy, Dracula etc., but it flopped, and took the whole universe with it. Solo, which I actually didn't mind too much, Killed off the plans for more Star Wars spin-off movies focusing on side characters. Instead we got lots of Star Wars TV shows, which I'm more than cool with. Well, in particular The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, but really the entire Chronicles of Narnia film series was so bad it killed off any desire for more films of the series, probably forever. Alien, Covenant, there were supposed to be more prequels that brought us to the original Alien, but alas it bombed. I hear there is a TV show in the works. It's too big of a franchise to actually kill, but the prequel series is cancelled. Aragon, worst book to movie ever made, pure tripe. It didn't kill the entire franchise, but I'm surprised Warner Brothers still continues producing the other Fantastic Beasts movies after so many people hated the second one because of awful storylines, too many new characters, terrible screenplay, creating new plot holes and errors, bad pacing, and not to mention that a lot of the storylines didn't really lead up to anything, other than some fan service. It felt like the movie had an identity crisis and didn't know which main character should be the mascot of the franchise. Was it Newt, Dumbledore, or was it Credence? The movie didn't do any of these characters justice. Aragon, it had 3 awesome books. It could have been the next Lord of the Rings. It had video games. Then out came the movie. It was such a flop that nobody wanted to speak of it ever again. Predator 2018. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I understand that film is not the same medium as books. You have to cut things for time, for complexity, and sometimes those changes mean that characters get combined, events change a bit, etc. I get it, but when you completely alter multiple characters' core personalities, motivations, etc., and try to take a series as comedically bleak as HGTTG and make it cheerful, you have lost your way. Aragon didn't even give the rest of the series a chance to get started. Not sure if it was ever meant to be a franchise, but Mortal Engines was really bad. Last Airbender, fuck you Shyamalan. Ender's Game, the source material is so good you don't even understand, had the chance to be such a mega franchise. Instead they cast Rico from Hannah Montana to play one huge pinnacle role, hire a kid who can't act to play Ender, completely miss 60% of what actually made the books good, and give characters who make the story worth tuning in for no screen time. They took a masterpiece and made the worst version of it possible. I still remember the hour and long of disappointment in that movie. The Fifth Wave. After Earth, IIRC Will Smith wanted to turn this into a huge franchise, multiple movies, spin-off TV shows, toys, comics, etc. The movie did poorly enough that these plans were all scrapped. The remake of RoboCop was absolutely terrible. Solo, I've heard it's actually pretty good, but from what I remember Disney did a piss poor job of promoting it, combined with the recent backlash from The Last Jedi, and the fact that it was sandwiched in between Infinity War and Deadpool 2 meant it was basically destined to flop, and Star Wars hasn't since been able to really recover movie-wise. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's what convinced Lucasfilm to make the Obi-Wan adaptation a show instead of a movie. Beverly Hills Cop 3, it wasn't as funny or as good as the first two. Asked in 1989 about a third installment, Murphy stated, "There's no reason to do it, I don't need the money and it's not gonna break any new ground. How often can you have Axel Foley talk fast and get into a place he doesn't belong? But these motherfuckers are developing scripts for it, they're in pre-production. The only reason to do a Cop 3 is to beat the bank, and Paramount ain't gonna write me no check as big as I want to do something like that. In fact, if I do a Cop 3, you can safely say, oh, he must have got a lot of money." Titanic, they foolishly sunk the ship and killed off the male lead. Aragon, one of the most successful new age fantasy series ever, and the directors hamstrung it in every way possible. At one point the author was asked if he wanted to see a sequel, and he said he was still waiting on the first book to be made into a movie. Does Game of Thrones Season 8 count? Any movie after T2 in the Terminator franchise. Edit, I have achieved my goal of causing controversy. X-Men Origins, Wolverine sort of counts. They were planning on making more X-Men Origins movies, but that one sucked so much they decided to scrap that idea and just do a prequel, which led to us getting X-Men First Class, which was worth it. I see a lot of people talking about First entry films which killed the franchise. But that's pathetic. Fat slags. It's a British comedy film adapted from an adult comic book called Viz. Produced in 2004, it was considered so bad that not only was there serious debate in whether the British film industry was dying, but when the original comic strip's writer saw what had been made of his strip, he and Viz had no creative control since the publishers sold off the rights to their strips years previously. That there were rumors that he quit and tried to get the strip cancelled, that wasn't true, but the film did kill his drive and he needed to be replaced for a while. How many films listed here were so bad they almost took out the source material? The Mummy with Tom Cruise, shut down a whole universe somehow. Partly. The Mummy 3, in China. I really liked the first two movies though, and still do. Game of Thrones ended so bad that I cannot watch the good seasons knowing the shit that it turns into. Also Highlander 2. POTC Dead Men Tell No Tales seems like one. I know they haven't come out with any other movies after that, but I probably won't watch them even if they do. Must have watched the first 3 movies more than 10 times, but Stranger Tides killed it, and DMTNT was the final nail in the coffin. Avatar, The Last Airbender, they were planning 1 movie per season, but the first movie was horrible so they didn't make any more. Didn't the new Mummy with Tom Cruise basically kill off the dark universe with Dracula and Frankenstein? I feel like some people in this thread are just naming films that underperformed on the box office instead of being really bad, or films that were bad, but there were still films after that. My pick, Remo Williams, The Adventure Begins, an adaptation of a popular series of pulp paperbacks. The adventure ended after the first one. The Dark Tower movie, I love the books. That movie was such a disappointment. Daredevil, it killed its own sequel. Ben Affleck disowned that film. They tried a spin-off with Elektra, and while that may not have been expected to have sequels, it was bad enough to get its game cancelled. Catwoman, it was so bad that Halle Berry leaned into it at an awards ceremony. There was supposed to be an animated film, but that was cancelled. In some alternate world somewhere, the correct answer is The Fast and the Furious. Charlie's Angels, 2019. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The books and the original BBC series are masterpieces. Some of the movie was okay, but the problem with it was they focused too much on turning it into a love story that would attract an audience who was unfamiliar with the books. Instead, all that did was annoy the original fans who hated how they drastically changed the story to tack on a romance that was totally not there nor relevant in the books. They had intended to make it a trilogy, just like the original book series, but they screwed up the first one too badly. Bummer. Seems like a lot of people have confused the question for what's a bad movie. Highlander, Queen did Who Wants to Live Forever for the first one and it got good reviews. The second and third were terrible. According to my dad who watched it in theaters, he told the people lining up for the next showing the whole story because he didn't want people to go through the pain he went through. Not movie, rather TV show, but Game of Thrones Season 8. Yes, this is a low-hanging fruit, but you need to remember the magnitude of the show's final season fuck-up at the time. Weeks before the season even started, people were arguing intensely over whether or not some leaks that read like fanfiction were actually going to happen in the season. Unresolved plot points, resolutions that didn't make sense in the context of the series, things that should have burned over 2 seasons happening in a single episode, etc. Then the cast interviews came out and almost all of them seemed to be hesitant to hype up the final season. You had a lot of stammers and awkward laughter but very few genuinely excited interviews about the final season. And then the season started, and the leaks were correct. Then the season continued, and the leaks were still ending up true. Finally it ended with the vast majority of the audience coming to the harrowing conclusion: the actors were nervous for a reason. D went in hiding before the finale's air for a reason. The leaks were not trolling, they were 100% correct. 8 years of build-up wiped out in just 6 short weeks. It killed the main writers' careers. They went from potential big-name writers with the opportunity to work on Star Wars after finishing their magnum opus, to nobodies in the screenwriting industry. Surely some of the backlash against the show plays a part in the dreadfully long wait for the last 2 books from the book series author. It just ruined everything. A fantasy work that had the potential to be praised on the same level as or higher than the Lord of the Rings book/film trilogy. now a pathetic blip in television history most viewers simply hope to forget about. The 2017 Power Rangers movie. I think Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull put an end to Indiana Jones movies, even though they were trying to pass the torch to Shia LaBeouf. I think he dropped it. Maze Runner 2. The first concept was really cool, but they just randomly changed it into a zombie movie. I like those, but keep that separate. I am number 4. Thanks for watching. Comment suggestions for any future videos and make sure to subscribe to not miss out on any more good content. I upload daily videos from r/AskReddit, and if you liked the video, make sure to like the video.